Conservatives are now in a corner because major CEOs from some of Alberta's biggest energy companies all support a price on carbon. And the Trudeau government is using the Stephen Harper government targets on greenhouse gas emissions. So what are they really against? Let's find out. Joining me now, the Conservative MP from Calgary Nose Hill, Michelle Rempel. Great to see you. You voted against the ratification of the Paris Climate Accord. The Liberals passed it. Now remember, Stephen Harper said he would only ratify this kind of thing if the big emitters came on board, like the US and China. They're on board. Why vote against it?
We supported a motion, an amended motion, that would support the Paris Agreement, the ratification of the Paris Agreement, but it was the second component of the motion that was problematic for me personally. The second component of that motion dealt with the Vancouver Agreement the government had, as well as, frankly, the announcement about the carbon tax this week. So we voted against the wording of the motion because I believe that there are better ways to achieve our goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Canada.
Okay, but for 10 years, the Conservatives said you would put regulations on the oil and gas industry. They never happened. They said we'll only sign on when the big emitters sign on to these are just targets. The Paris, they're not even binding targets, they're targets. Does it start to look like the Conservatives will look for any way out of signing any agreement on reductions of greenhouse gas?
First of all, to correct you, on the oil and gas regulations, we agree those are important. They have to be done in the context of the North American overall climate policy, right? Because if we're putting those regulations in place and our biggest trading partner to the south, who is a major international emitter, if there isn't some alignment on that, first of all, there isn't actually going to be a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And second of all, we have to look at the economic impact. I do think that
but you're ducking two things. There's two different things there. There were no regulations on oil and gas for 10 years under Stephen Harper, and the Paris Agreement is the target. Why not just at least, you can debate how you get there, why not at least endorse and ratify the targets?
Because that was not what we were voting on. So that's a false question.
Well, it's part of it.
That's what you said. It was part of it, right? And the government put a poison pill, frankly, in that motion.
Carbon price. The Liberals now put a $10 a ton price on carbon beginning in 2018, and then it will start going up. You have said that this doesn't work. Now, I agree that it will not be enough to reach their own targets, which, by the way, are the same targets as Stephen Harper. It's not enough. Why do you say putting a price on carbon doesn't work?
Because when you go and fill your car up, if you're paying 90 cents a liter for gas or $2 a liter for gas, you still have to fill your car up at this point in time, right? So what that means is that the price that they've put isn't really going to change demand. There's no modeling that shows that it's going to, in and of itself, change demand for carbon products.
Can I just say something? I know you and I have had this discussion. So I looked. You said there's no data.
Yes.
I actually have data on both of those things. On cars, here's the study. Frugal cars and frugal drivers. And this was just out May 18th, the University of British Columbia. And the study basically, does carbon taxes influence the choice of cars? And it says the BC carbon tax demand per capita would be 7% higher, and the average vehicle's fuel efficiency would be 4% lower without it. As they say, per capita gasoline demand in BC has decreased by 15% between 2007 and 2014.
But wait, so it's sensitive. You have to push, but sensitive to what point, right? Like, for sure, carbon is not perfectly inelastic. There is going to be some change, some minimal change, right? The question becomes over what period of time, and will it be enough to make our target? So let's talk about BC, okay? So everybody uses the BC carbon tax as sort of the example on how we can affect change, but we know that from 2010 to 2014, BC emissions actually rose. I think it was by over 4%, right? Most economists agree that unless we're at somewhere between $150 and $250 a megaton, we're not going to see demand reduction. We don't know what the economic impact is going to be on Canada price. Or, let's say, there's another.
Slow down. So there's
I know.
Well, so
but
hold on,
it's
just
important,
a second.
right?
There's a study here that says the BC carbon tax actually changed how they drove. So studies are showing that a carbon tax reduces emissions, changes driver behavior.
Not to the level of our national targets.
But now you're moving the goalposts.
No, I'm not.
First you said they didn't work.
No.
They do work.
Let me finish.
They don't work to the targets.
First of all, if we're stating national targets, that should be the driver for what our policy is, right? So if we're saying this is where our greenhouse gas reduction or emissions are going to be at this period of time, then the policy instruments that we put in place should reflect that. And if the opportunity cost or the cost to the Canadian public or the economy is such that it becomes prohibitive, then we have to look at those targets. What you're citing here is data that isn't necessarily going to get us to that point, and that's my issue with the $50 price a ton.
I agree.
You got to cite all this stuff. I want to finish my point. So if we're pricing carbon at that point, and it's not actually going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we need to look at other things like flexible regulations, like carbon capture and sequestration, like energy efficiency regs. Why are we presenting this as the panacea when in fact it's probably going to function like a GST?
You've got all these big companies. You've got Cenovus, Suncor, Shell, Total, Stat Oil, the big energy companies in Alberta who also, Enbridge, TransCanada, they all support this. And you tweeted out the rich CEOs of the big companies that can scoop up assets after a tax bankrupt that bankrupts junior players are certainly going to call for this. How do you look, you're from Alberta, how do you look at the CEOs of the biggest employers in the energy sector who support this because they say it works and you don't?
You have to ask questions like, well, what price of carbon do they already have priced into their production methods? Like, are they actually going to change production behavior at that rate? Another question, at that price, how much does gasoline price increase, and does that actually create an economic condition where it's better to produce more oil sands and thus driving emissions up? One more thing too.
I got 10 seconds here.
Okay. The point I'm trying to make, Evan, is that if we're going to impose a tax on Canadians, and this is going to cost people money, you can't deny this.
Sure.
It's going to cost them in a real way. It's going to function like an increase in the GST because carbon is so pervasive. Then we better be darn well sure that it's going to work. And everything that you've cited here today, all of these reports, there is no data that shows that this plan is going to work. And as a legislator and somebody who stands up both for the economy and for our environment, we have to be asking that.
I will say that the cost is right. In BC, $30 a ton, it increases 7 cents a liter, and at $50 a ton, about 11 cents a liter. I mean, that's real world, and that's the way it's going to affect. All right, great debate always. Michelle Rempel, thanks so much.
Thank you.